Have you ever thought about how do you bring security to your APIs in the age of AI and generative AI? If that is the case, this episode 88 of Extra AI will be very interesting for you, where we kind of dive into the crucial world of cybersecurity in the age of AI, focusing on the security of APIs with our special guest Sanjay Nagaraj, the co-founder of Traceable AI. And I'm here, your host Raghu Banda. Sanjay Nagaraj brings a wealth of expertise and insights into how AI can enhance API security. And Traceable AI, known for its pioneering work, helps organizations protect their APIs from a range of security threats, ensuring that businesses can embrace the benefits of AI and generative AI technologies without compromising on safety. So in this episode, what we do, we will explore the landscape of API vulnerabilities, discuss how Traceable AI's solutions address these challenges, and examine the broader implications of AI in cybersecurity. So whether you are a cybersecurity professional, a developer, or simply interested in the intersection of AI and security, this conversation will provide valuable insights into how to protect your digital assets in the evolving tech environment. Join us for a deep dive into the world of securable APIs with Traceable AI on Extra AI. It's an episode packed with expert knowledge and advice on navigating the complexity of API security in today's AI-driven world. As always, you'll find more information at the end of the podcast. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. All right, welcome back to Extra AI, our podcast series on AI and machine learning applications. And today I have a guest, Mr. Sanjay Nagaraj of Traceable AI. We are going to talk about securing APIs with Traceable AI. Welcome on board, Sanjay. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Raghu. Good to be here.
All right, Sanjay. So before we get into the podcast conversation, this is an interesting conversation. I would like to first maybe ask this basic fun fact or a basic question about your journey, personal or professional, how you landed up into the world of AI. I know now everybody is talking about AI and generative AI, but everybody has a backstory, maybe a personal story or a professional story, whichever way.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent question. As you think about this, you're right. I was at a fireside chat yesterday with AWS and a bunch of others, and the AI topic has become very hot, and everybody is talking about AI, right? So just as a background and everything else, I have been in the DevSecOps space now for a couple of decades, even before the term existed that way. Prior to starting Traceable now, almost 5.5 years ago, prior to that, there was another company that I was part of building called AppDynamics in the application performance management space. So why I talk about that is when we started the company in end of 2018, 19, early 19, the company was Traceable AI. And at that point of time, if you think about it, people were, okay, I'm very curious, especially in the security world, why are you framing this as an AI company? And so we had to explain that AI doesn't mean that everything is automated or honestly, you don't have any control over it and whatnot, right? Especially in the security world where for the right reasons, they need to have control of the policies and everything else that they are actually, because there is explainability that's very important as part of security, right? Because you can't block the wrong things because that can impact the business. So it was a explain how AI plays a role in automating some aspects of discovery of your APIs or testing of the APIs to protection and everything else. We'll talk more about that. But then cut to the pandemic era and everything else, when everything started to become API driven, that's when customers started to realize, oh my God, my business is getting impacted if I'm not taking care of this, right? So that's when we started to see a lot of customers adopt Traceable as a product and company. But the journey towards AI from a customer's perspective started, of course, with the launch of ChatGPT. And a personal story there would be is that like with a lot of these things, you're curious as to why the growth of ChatGPT was so much, right? But I could see that a little bit earlier as well because I have a daughter who was in high school, and she started to talk about it much before anybody else. In fact, we knew, of course, about this and we were playing with it, but not to the extent that these kids were playing in high school. That's where they had 1 million downloads almost right away because all the kids started to see the impact of it, like with all new technology, right? So that's what the AI exposure personally for me was. But now cut to 24, everybody's talking about AI. So it's come full circle for me as we launched the company and where we are today. It's an interesting journey as we went through now.
Beautiful, beautiful. I like the aspects of how you said like AI is not just about automation or making everything work without, but there is a lot of data and how you can find
Correct.
out the information out of the data and understand and learn out of that. And APIs is one very interesting aspect. How do you trace? How do you make things explainable? Because those are the, I would say, the building blocks of bigger applications. APIs are the building blocks of the bigger applications, if I may say. So taking that into consideration before we get into the break and come back into our real conversation, maybe any fine thoughts that you have about this, the current Gen AI,
Yeah.
about the innovation happening around Gen AI, and how
Yeah.
is it triggering you personally or professionally, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So actually, I'll be honest. I've been in technology probably like you as well for a long time, and if you think about and again, I mean, I got exposed to neural networks now what almost 30 years ago, right? In terms of where they were 25, 30 years ago. And as we see, there has been a lot of changes built on top of this, right? And we all know it to an extent, the generative AI really picked up based on this paper that got published by Google. Attention is all you need from a transformer architecture perspective in case of generative AI, right? But of course, ChatGPT made that really famous in terms of a little bit of Copilot got launched and everything else, but at the same time, ChatGPT made it a lot more real for users, right? Because before that, the reason why when I was saying that even when we launched as well, AI was this dark term, or people did not really wrap their head around it because it felt like a magic. It felt like something which is a black box for people, right? But ChatGPT kind of allowed them to see how it can be applied to the use cases that they had in mind, right? So it became very, very real. But now, cut to enterprises today from a generative AI perspective, the way they have been thinking, as I talk to a lot of the CIOs at some of the largest financials and insurance and healthcare companies, the way they are thinking about how Gen AI applications can be built within their organizations, they are taking into consideration two aspects how they want to implement generative AI, right? One is they are taking how much is it valuable, right? That's one. The second part of it that they're considering is that what is the feasibility of doing something like this, right? So they're taking those two vectors because there may be certain things in healthcare. As an example, in healthcare, if you look at it, there are things like I want to automatically transcribe what doctors are saying, or I want to. We all get this. What is it called as an after summary visit summary
Right,
sheet that
right.
when we go to the doctor. So remember now today it's a pretty standard printed sheet with zero context for who I am as an individual or what the healthcare problem is, other than 3 or 4 lines at the bottom, which the doctor basically has put together as comments, right? But what some of the healthcare professionals now are basically working on, there as in healthcare companies and all that, what they're thinking about is how can I use generative AI to improve that? Because it's a lot more feasible and the value is also relatively high. But then if you look at the top of that pyramid, how you want to look at it as in the value side of it, probably automated medical care from a robotics perspective is probably at the top from a value perspective, but the feasibility, all that is also low, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it means that they're kind of balancing out the thought process in terms of what actually is very, very doable today and how much value it's going to add to make those decisions, right? But I'm very, very excited as a technologist and everything else, the way I'm seeing it, there is a long way to go. Personally, on my end, from the business that I've been part of, as in like not just as a security, but broader DevSecOps as use cases, I see a lot of use cases, and I'm also thinking about it almost in a similar direction. When we put anything from a product perspective, even internally, we're going to talk a little bit more about how we do it by using some of the techniques as well. We've been doing it. Some of that is evolving, of course, over the next not this last year, but over the next couple of years. Um, in terms of what is the most amount of value that we can. But because one of the things that we are seeing across the board, high value, high feasibility of getting it done, is everything based on chat bots that way, right? I was talking to a financial institution that way 2 weeks ago, where they were telling me that they are using it's more of financial assistance that way, as in financial guidance, I should say, for somebody who is looking to improve their credit score. That means that you can go and ask your bank, how do I improve my credit score? Rather than coming back with a standard canned answer about here is all the things that you do, they can customize to whatever your credit score is and the things that are relevant to your credit report, so that they have a very, very rich way of explaining how to actually improve it and take actions on it, right? So those are some of the things that I'm seeing, Raghu.
Beautiful.
Interesting set of things coming along.
Beautiful. I completely echo with your thoughts, Sanjay. I think there's a lot happening out there and there's a lot of potential use cases. Maybe let's take a quick break, come back, and then dive into our today's subject about security and the APIs. Okay. All right. Welcome back. So now, to continue our conversation, I would want to get into this aspect, Sanjay. Like you, we see a lot of AI is transforming a lot of these enterprises and consumer businesses in different ways. And now, like you rightfully mentioned, with generative AI, the capabilities are even more. Coming from the context of API security and risk management, maybe how do you see this evolving, or what are the implications of AI and the use of AI and generative AI in the API security and the risk management space? Any thoughts around that?
Absolutely. No, that's an excellent point. Before we talk about where the current is or the future is going to be, let's start to think about how application security itself evolved over a period of time, right? Like if you think about the days where application security was purely dealt at the network level in terms of network security, right? That started to evolve into application level firewalls, which was mostly dealing with web applications at the edge and trying to protect against malicious traffic that is flowing through those particular web application calls, as in it could be static web pages or it could be dynamic web pages, but mostly at web URLs level that way, right? And that's when the deep packet filtering and everything else was introduced from Palo and others in terms of securing the traffic itself. And then there is the whole securing the internal infrastructure all the way from the network into the type of infrastructure that you have deployed, whether it is in VMs or as in air gapped data centers, it could be, or the cloud and everything else, right? So that's where you started to see all of the CSPM vendors start to come in to understand what the posture of the cloud deployments are, and that's obviously still a very, very relevant problem, right? And the vulnerabilities associated with those web applications itself at a code level, so that you can actually go and detect them in your pre-production system, so that you can deploy software updates and everything else to make sure the vulnerabilities don't exist that are not exploited by hackers. Now, cut to as I was talking about the 2018-19 journey that way, is that every business started to move towards becoming an API-driven business, right? Because prior, if you think about it, the traffic in Starbucks, for example, before the pandemic, used to be a lot more. The traffic has started to trickle back in. Of course, Starbucks is having their own issues in terms of not able to sell more, but ignoring that, the traffic has started to trickle back in. But if you look at the pandemic state side of it, everything was online. People were ordering from their mobile apps. People were picking up on the outside. Nobody wanted to go in. That means it was all mobile traffic. And mobile traffic was always translated into some form of an API traffic in the background, right? So that means that as the businesses get transformed and APIs are actually truly enabling the digital transformation from actually happen over a period of time. We've been talking about digital transformation for a long time, and some of that is actually coming to fruition now, right? And I'll also talk about how generative AI is actually enhancing that now, right? But if you think about both sides of it, as in API starting to take on and the generative AI application starting to get built, as you said, to enhance that, at the end of the day, you're getting either your business productivity up or your user productivity, as in customer productivity and customer experience that is being improved, right? Both sides of it is what is in generative AI. We'll talk about that. But from API's perspective, that means that because everything started to get used as APIs, the challenge was there is no longer a single perimeter to be protected as a web application firewall was doing, right? That means that now you have to think about these APIs can pop up anywhere. They can go through some form of an API gateway where the traffic is coming through, or a load balancer it could be, or in some cases they're directly exposed to the internet as well. So how do you kind of protect across all of these different scenarios without just focusing on a single edge became the biggest problem, right? And that is where Traceable came in to say that, hey, we can help you actually protect this. But in all honesty, before protecting, I'll tell you this: there was this financial organization that I was talking to 2.5 years ago now. And when I went to them and I asked them, today, do you know where these APIs are, so that we can actually help you protect them? The answer that came back to them, yeah, we know where these APIs are. I said, okay, how do you get to know? And they told me they pass around an Excel sheet around their entire organization across. They have almost 10,000 applications across. They're going to pass this out across all of these teams and say, go fill out all the URLs across the board, right? And then and immediately before I even asked the question, the gentleman said, you do recognize that it's already out of date the moment I send out the sheet? I was like, yeah, absolutely. So what do you do? Why I'm telling that is there are basic problems in our enterprises, which is real, because developers are just pushing out code because for them it is about developing functionality. But for everybody else who's looking at it from a CIO level down, whether it is the CISO or the CIOs, that way, if you look at it, depending on the organization, their concern is that where are these APIs, right? Now cut to the same thing from a generative AI perspective, they're having the same problem. Where are these generative AI applications, right? That means that it is creating this culture of shadow AI, shadow API. That where the problem starts is first to identify where these APIs are, what type of data is flowing through those APIs. That's become the primary challenge for a lot of our customers right now, right? Then we can talk about protecting them, which is what we do, because every organization, as you can imagine, every enterprise has a range of capabilities, range of maturity that they have. That means that some environment, like I was talking about, is immature in the sense that they don't even know where their APIs are. But there are some people who really have all of these APIs documented. They know exactly what is going on. If not 100% of it, 90% of it, they know. But their challenge is protecting those APIs now and testing those APIs in before in the application security market, all of these was fragmented. You had people who used to do web application firewalls on the edge. They used to protect the edge. There was all of these tooling in the back end to kind of go and say, I'm going to scan the code. I'm going to scan the applications itself to understand what types of vulnerabilities exist and everything else. And then there were players who were going to go detect fraud on these applications. With APIs, all of these things are coming together, because if you understand the API in one place, you understand it internally, you understand it externally, as well as anything that you may be calling outside as an API, you understand that end to end, right? So it's a holistic way of thinking about it now.
Right. So basically, you will need to understand what goes into the API, what are the different parameters that go into the API, what is the data in this API. So you rightfully mentioned, I think the beautiful example that you gave, I think these are some of the challenges, like the businesses that you are dealing with. Maybe somebody is carrying an Excel file or somebody is doing few other things. So there are different kinds of challenges being faced. Uh, and there are a lot of threats around that, right? Like what are some of these like threat protection related principles that you follow, maybe to
Yeah,
handle these? There might be a lot of API abuse, or there might be a lot of fraud as well. So
absolutely.
you will need
Absolutely.
to follow some kind of uh, principles, right? Like what these,
Yes.
what are some of those things that maybe if you would want to highlight some of those?
Yeah, so I think, see, when you think about anything as a threat,
Mhm.
from an API perspective, the basic thing that needs to be understood is the knowledge of that API itself. What
Mhm.
I call as the DNA of that API. What do I mean by that? You need to understand where this API is deployed, who is using it, as in what types of services are using it, what types of end users are using it, and what is the sequence in which those APIs are accessed. Because not every API is accessed the same way. So you need to understand the overall structure of the access patterns of the API itself. That's one. The second thing that you need to understand is the access control for those APIs. Right? You
Yeah.
need to be very aware of the types of users who have been actually provided access to that API. And then the third part of it is you need to understand the data and the data compliance aspects of those APIs. Right? Which is you need to know whether some form of sensitive data is in the request that is coming in or the responses that is coming in. Right? All of this is collectively, if you look at it, is what would form a spec associated with the API, right?
Mhm.
In some cases, developers are going to be writing it. In other cases, it may not exist because either it's a legacy API or the developers are honestly not up to date or maintaining it. That means that you need a tool or you need a system in place, ignoring Traceable, whether it does it or not. You need a system in place to be able to continuously monitor the APIs that are deployed and the API specifications itself to make sure they're up to standard, they're compliant with your internal policies, and also not just your API policy, but your data policies, right?
Mhm.
That's the first thing that needs to be put in place. The second thing, when you look at all of these things, is to make sure that these APIs are being tested to understand the vulnerabilities associated with those APIs. These vulnerabilities are not your legacy vulnerabilities where you can just look at and say, okay, if I send a simple SQLi as part of the API call, whether SQLi is there or not, those are still real. But the vulnerabilities have actually gotten much more now, including something which is a business logic vulnerability, where an IDOR or a BOLA kind of can be embedded as part of these, where a particular object ownership is actually violated. Because if let's say, for example, you have an Uber application,
Mhm.
the Uber app as a mobile app entirely, or a banking app, is entirely driven by APIs in the background. That
Mhm.
means that Uber had this actual case where basically I was able to access, if I was a hacker, I was able to access Raghu's all the rights that he had done, because I
Mhm.
was say I'm authenticated against that API, but I may
Mhm.
not be authorized to access Raghu's API because of a bug in the authorization services. I was now able to access data that did not belong to me. Right? There are
Mhm.
privacy concerns, there are fraud concerns, so many other things that come on top of this. Right? So it means that you need to start to test for those use cases to make sure that you're kind of in a way understanding the business logic vulnerabilities, if you can fix them in your dev and pre-production environments itself, right? The other key thing there is people may say, yeah, I always run my SAST or DAST or IaaS type of tests. But the challenge there is that some of these legacy tools are built for legacy applications, as in web applications,
Right.
where scanning was a lot more easier. In the case of APIs, there is not an easy way to scan a particular API because you're fuzzing an API. You're kind of you're trying to make some guesses about what those APIs are. Right? That is where the technology needs to be upgraded, and that's where tools like Traceable and such are going to come in, where we have built smarts now into not only discovering these APIs from your various aspects of where the code is deployed itself, but also based on the spec if you have it, but also based on the real traffic that's flowing through these APIs. So we can reverse engineer some of the behavioral understanding, as I was saying, about an API DNA to test these APIs the right way. Right. The third aspect of it, from a protection perspective, is where you need to now go and say not everything is going to be caught in your pre-production deployments. So how do you kind of protect yourself at runtime, but also when these APIs are already deployed in production, till the time you actually go update that to fix the vulnerabilities that you have, how do you go protect these APIs in runtime? So you need the next generation of API protection for it. That is where tools like Traceable come in to go protect you against these attacks, but also certain threats which are fraudulent activities that are happening through the API, right? That's what you would do. Last but not the least, you have to think about threat hunting. What is your threat hunting mapping? Do you understand the data flow that's happening end to end in your environment? That is where the entire threat analysis needs to be done, in terms of understanding what your threat landscape looks like on those APIs, right? So you need to think about this end to end, Raghu.
Beautiful. I think you gave a very beautiful explanation about how you're handling what are the threat principles that you have laid out, or how you need to handle the security aspects of it. And you beautifully explained about the API patterns, and then the controls that have to be taken care of, and the data that goes in there. And
Yeah.
now maybe I would want to take one step back and understand
Please.
where Traceable is coming in from. I know you gave
Yeah.
a beautiful background about that, but maybe can you speak to the audience about a very high level overview about Traceable AI, where it is coming in from? What is your mission statement? What is your vision? Who are your end users? Are you basically B2B or B2C, or maybe a few thoughts around that?
Sure. So Traceable is obviously in the business of protecting our customers from API attacks. But as I was laying out, from a Traceable product perspective, one of the unique ways that every startup, when you go and build a startup, takes an approach towards solving a particular problem. In our case, our entire idea was, how do we go protect these APIs from the next generation of attacks that are coming on the APIs? But we did not go with the approach of, let me just take only that as the niche use case of runtime and go build a platform for it, right? Our approach was a little bit different in the sense that we said, let's go build a platform which can understand these APIs from the ground up. What do I mean by that? That means that, as I was saying, every API has some form of a DNA associated with it in terms of the behavioral understanding of how this API came to being, what does it do on a daily basis, who are the users of it, what is the data that's consuming, and what is the data that it is responding with, right? And where all it's deployed, right? We had to take that entire 360-degree context to understand what an API DNA is, right? Based on that DNA, we can then go solve a whole bunch of use cases, which include, first, as I said, it's very important to discover the APIs, where these APIs exist, what type of data do they have. That means that you're helping in all forms of understanding from a GRC perspective, as in from a governance and compliance, definitely understanding the risk associated with these APIs. Are they carrying sensitive data, and are they carrying, for example, are they money-based transactions? So kind of go and help people understand the overall posture associated with the APIs itself. The second part of it was, we wanted to make sure that people can actually catch some of the vulnerabilities in their pre-production environments itself, That is where we built a very innovative testing tool on these APIs. Because as I said, the ground up is the DNA that you build. Once you have the DNA, then we said, okay, what type of vulnerabilities exist in that API? Let's go test for those, right? And then we basically said, that's where we started to identify vulnerabilities for these customers, so that they can fix them in their pre-production environments itself much sooner. Now, then the next part of it was there are many types of attacks that happen at runtime across billions of calls that actually we monitor. And I'll talk about some of the customers at a high level and everything else. We said we have to protect that at runtime. So we have the threat protection module, which kind of enables them to go and protect these API calls itself, right? Lastly, we have the threat analytics piece, which is the one which helps them do threat hunting. Now, the key question to answer, which I was talking about, which is why are we different as a platform itself? As I said, everybody takes an approach. The approach we took was, as I said, we need to build this API DNA. But how do you build this API DNA? What we did was the fundamental approach is we want to collect the data about your APIs, about the users of those APIs, the infrastructure associated with that API, and a whole bunch of other things, and bring all that into an OmniTrace engine that we have, which is backed by our own API security data lake, which backs the OmniTrace engine. And that engine is the one which consumes all of this data and builds out all of the insights to enable these use cases that I talked about, right? That's a very unique differentiation in terms of where the platform is. And the biggest reason why we went in that direction was the platform has this data advantage that nobody else in the market today has that advantage, right? Okay. And if you think about some of the customers, some of the largest financials that we all use day to day, to some of the insurance companies, to healthcare, some of the entertainment businesses that we are all familiar with, that we use on a day to day, to some of the retail businesses that are there. So overall, mostly based on I should say at least 80% of the business is based on in North America. Worldwide business is growing as well, and we're still getting started as a company. Long way to go. One other thing to think about is, as I was talking about all of the layers of the platform and how the platform is built based on the data advantage. This data advantage helps us in solving the Gen AI security as well for our customers. Because as I was saying, most of the Gen AI applications are consumed through APIs. That means that if you're building some form of a chatbot functionality on top of an enterprise data, let's say you're a healthcare company, as I said, and you want to build an application enhancement for your customers, you're building that through APIs in the backend. That means that these Gen AI applications are talking through APIs, but what's happening is they're actually consuming either OpenAI in the backend or a Gemini or whatnot as a third-party service, or they're hosting the language models within their environment itself. That means that we are able to detect that flow starting all the way from the edge into that activity that happens within the Gen AI layer itself in terms of the LLMs itself, because they're also all wrapped around as APIs. We can now capture that. We can help them understand the shadow AI. We can test those APIs for all of the OWASP top 10 for LLMs. We can protect against some of the attacks, including prompt injection and everything else. So that's how the platform has been built for scale.
Beautiful, beautiful. So this is where I have a question about how can customers use Traceable AI platform? Is it available? Is it integratable into their customer's platform or into the enterprise's platform? Or is it also available as a SaaS service where you kind of, again, use an API to trigger it and then do it? Or maybe you want to give a quick background about that?
Sure. So the Traceable as a platform is available both in SaaS as well as in on-prem. That's very unique to us as a platform. We have some customers who are running it even in air-gapped environments where no one else has access to it as well. So completely on-prem. And there is a component, of course, that sits as part of whether you're running in SaaS or in on-prem. There's a component that basically helps us collect the data within your environment, and that is where the platform shines because we have probably one of the most comprehensive data collection capabilities on the market because of our richness based on our past experiences building data collection techniques and everything else at AppDynamics and many other places. And we collect data at scale and ingest and process at scale to enable some of the largest financial services to blockchain slash Bitcoin enablers on the market, to some of the largest digital payment providers on the market. So that's the fun part of how the platform can scale.
Beautiful, beautiful. We don't need to go into any confidentiality details of any customers' names or anything like that. But do you want to, for the sake of the audience, to kind of get a complete end-to-end flow? Do you want to pick up a customer scenario and explain like how
Sure.
you were able to showcase value to the
Sure.
customer? Maybe any particular
Sure.
example that you.
Absolutely. Without taking any customers as a name, one of the there are many instances, but let me take an instance of a very large financial bank that way. The journey that we went through with them starts always with discovery of their APIs and testing of the APIs, right? That's the journey that we started with. Which was across their thousands of services that we have, which have deployed these APIs. So we were able to kind of monitor those APIs and build out the specifications for them, which they could continuously then maintain and develop and everything else based on those APIs. And then, of course, test for vulnerabilities and identified many vulnerabilities that they had within their business logic itself to actually go and enable them to fix those. Of course, fixing things which were like, hey, there are unauthenticated APIs or APIs that didn't have the right headers flowing through them as the calls were being made. All of those things are basic set of vulnerabilities, but the business logic vulnerabilities that we identified during the testing phases itself, which helped them shift left in terms of understanding their posture, overall posture, was very beneficial. But the next part of it for them was identifying account takeover, credential stuffing, it could be, or post account takeover fraudulent activities that were happening. Right. So we were able to actually go detect that for them. There is a very interesting use case where we were able to detect a fraudulent attack, which was happening which transformed account takeover. Started with the phishing attack, but then once the phishing attack happened, the attackers were mostly mechanical Turks. So it was not like they were bots or something like that in terms of they are human bots, if I were to use that term. So that means that they were able to kind of capture this more as a manual information that way, which then they were able to use that over a period of time to create these fraudulent activities. But the thing is that if you're monitoring activity or threat activity only for let's say a day or a few hours or whatever, you would miss these attacks.
Right.
But in our case, because the platform is built for scale, the platform is built for long-term knowledge with the data advantage that I was talking about, we were able to go and say, how is this attack happening over a period of time, 10 days, 15 days, 20 days? So that is when the activities slowly start. They go quiet after the account takeover has happened. That means that you and me, if our accounts are taken, we wouldn't even realize that the account has been taken over. Otherwise, we would act on it, right? So that is where some of these things we were able to help them actually identify these fraudulent type of activities, which they were missing, or they were losing dollars, not like they were missing, because finally they get to know because the customers call them and say, hey, I lost money here, right? But if we are able to accelerate identification of some of these things much earlier, because we are looking for signals based on behavior across the users of those APIs, we were able to actually detect. So overall, it was a very successful story. And this happens at smaller institutions and larger institutions where we monitor, I don't know, for some of the largest payment providers, we monitor close to almost I would say 400 billion calls per month across hundreds and thousands of APIs. That actually is mind-boggling, but obviously something that we're pretty proud of.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's an amazing piece of example that you gave. We are coming to the close of our podcast. I think I try to keep it between 45 minutes to an hour. I'm coming to now the most interesting question of the podcast, or I term it as the extra AI X factor question. So, what is that one? I know there's a lot of competition out there for
Yeah.
companies like Traceable, or as a matter of fact, we have tons of these things going on out there.
Yeah.
What is that differentiation factor in one word or one sentence or one phrase? Or how are you unique? Or
Yeah.
any thoughts or anything that you would like to bring it?
The two words that I would use to describe the differentiation would be the data advantage. Because we are able to collect data at very, very complex environments, and we have done that across multiple customers in North America today. And the data advantage, because of the API data lake that we have, enables us to solve not just the problems that they have today, but a lot of the problems that are unknown problems that are going to come tomorrow based on the same data, right?
Mhm.
And the other main thing is that we have been able to deploy this at customers, not just as shelfware, but something where they're continuously realizing the value. That's where the differentiation comes in, because of the customer obsession that we have to make sure that all these customers are deriving value from the product.
Beautiful, beautiful. I like the way you have put it. I think any key takeaways or highlights that you would like to provide for the audience, and maybe what are your thoughts with all this generative AI stuff going on from your traceable AI standpoint of the innovations going on in Gen AI? What kind of Gen AI innovations would be helpful for you to help your customers succeed?
Absolutely. That's excellent. So when you think about generative AI, I always think of it as a tool that's going to have both the bright side as well as the dark side to an extent, because the tooling that we all use to enhance, it could be a user experience, or the tooling that we use internally to make sure we are getting better and better at all the use cases that I was talking about. The same thing is going to be used by the hackers and the bad people in the world as well, right? That means that we need to be watching for both sides of it. We should be building tooling to enhance all of the capabilities, including how we detect some of these APIs, as I was talking about, to how we can actually identify unknown vulnerabilities in these APIs. And in fact, how do you actually even identify from a code level itself some of the vulnerabilities? A lot of the advancements are going to come in that direction by using language models which are more fine-tuned towards detection of code level vulnerabilities, to runtime protection, fraudulent detection, fraud activity detection, and everything else. I'm sure there is a lot of advancement that's going to come, not just from Traceable, from many other tools on the market as well, right? But also we need to be watching out for how the hackers are going to be using this as well.
Mhm.
That means that they're going to use the generative AI applications, for example, to go and actually disrupt the business. That's where you should be actually thinking about understanding where these applications are deployed, what type of Gen AI APIs are getting used, and what are you consuming from a model's perspective. So you need to have I think the bottom line on some of this is that if you as a business don't understand how Gen AI is being used internally, or how developers are actually utilizing it, it's time that you get to know about it, because
Mhm.
it's only going to get complex going forward.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I completely echo with your thoughts there. I think you need to understand to make sure that how you can better predict what's going to happen and then take corrective
Exactly.
actions ahead of time.
Exactly.
Okay. Any closing takeaways for the audience of where we can find
No,
more information about Traceable AI or something like
absolutely. Please visit traceable.ai. And all the information is there. And of course, you can engage with me on LinkedIn, where I'm mostly there, and definitely look forward to engaging with your listeners.
Awesome. It's great chatting with you, Sanjay. I myself learned a
Sorry.
lot about APIs is one topic where we all grew up with. We know how APIs are the
Yes.
backbone of connecting things. Uh,
Yeah.
and now with the AI and generative AI stuff going on, there's a lot of potential out there. And I truly uh, wish you all guys for some success.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Raghu. Thank you.
So that's a wrap on episode 88 of Extra AI. A huge thank you first to Sanjay Nagaraj from Traceable AI for joining us today and sharing his expert insights into securing APIs at the age of AI and generative AI. Sanjay's deep knowledge and practical advice have undoubtedly shed a lot of light on critical security practices that are essential for safeguarding our digital infrastructures. We also obviously want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to you all, the audience of Extra AI, for tuning in regularly and engaging with us in this important discussion. Keep sending those comments and feedback our way, and we'll get many more interesting conversations. Your curiosity and participation make Extra AI a valuable platform for exploring the cutting edge of AI and cybersecurity. As always, if you have any further questions, you can directly reach out to Sanjay. I'll be tagging him on the LinkedIn post. Uh, Alternatively, you can reach out to me, Raghu Banda, on LinkedIn, and I can put you in touch with Sanjay. You can also reach out to me on my other social media channels like my Twitter or X handle, RK Banda, or on my Threads handle, RK Banda. You can also reach out on our XTraAI.com, the website, XTrawAI.com, where you can find many more interesting episodes in the realm of AI. Looking ahead, we have more exciting episodes coming up. We got two more episodes to end the season 9. So stay glued to Extra AI for more deep dives into innovative AI applications and discussions with leading experts in the field. If you haven't subscribed to the Extra AI podcast yet, we encourage you to do so now. This way, you won't miss any of our upcoming content that is sure to inform, inspire, and intrigue. Thank you once again for joining us on Extra AI, and we look forward to having you with us on the next episode. Until then, have a good morning, good afternoon, or evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Happy predicting the future with AI technologies. This is your host, Raghu Banda, signing off now. Thank you.